Uju in dinaway maganaduk. Such one in the go, dash mang and odame. Kabakan and dap and Kazman, dash meanwhile we okpia makpia has a miedo. It's good to speak to you all today. I'm not the Tippo, but I do work for the Tippo. I don't want to take credit for my boss's good work. Um, I am the archivist and do collections management for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. I'm from Treaty 3. My father's from Nigagunsa and my mom's from Lac Sioux First Nation. I work for the Tippo department in the summertime between ground thaw and ground freeze. So we're looking for William Warren's house today, which seems to be mostly clearing brush. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the university's role in archaeology in the state and the mound and non-mound burials that that they have been a part of excavating over the years. It's there we go. I was just gonna say next slide. Oh, miigwech. One of the things that one of the things there are 11,000 mounds recorded in the state of Minnesota, and those are just the recorded ones. We've done burial recoveries at the Mille Lacs Band up there, especially. Most of them are under 169. They were bulldozed during the 20s and sometimes earlier than that. And whenever they do bridge work or road work, we need to be there to keep an eye on things. Before we came into this time where Native people had control over these kinds of activities, it was typically places like the university that had control over this. I included this quote from The Shining. It's the first thing that turned up when I started looking for quotes about Indian mounds in Minnesota. Was actually this quote from The Shining, and it gave me a chuckle that this movie from the 70s gets results before we do. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a map, and it shows where these 11,000 recorded mounds are in the state of Minnesota. It's all the red dots. I believe the green ones are non-mound burials. You can see a great deal of them are in Dakota territory. You can see where they go along the river even. You can almost tell where the river goes by the mounds. The work that I did was to attempt, not seeing the slides on Zoom, they say. I'm seeing it though, and I'm on Zoom. What we did was go through some of the university's archives and get field notes from the anthropology department. And it turns out a lot of those are at the have been transferred to the Minnesota Historical Society, which we are in the process. Oh, good, she can see them. Which we're in the process of getting access to still. I didn't get as far as I'd like before the archaeology season kicked off, and had some other things that I had to prioritize for the band. But I hope my plan is to continue this. So what we did is we looked at those field notes, and what happened over time in looking at those notes, next slide, please, is that we were able to find out that there are a minimum of 205 incursions into Indigenous burials in Minnesota. Now that 205 is instances. It's not the number of actual burials that have been disturbed. In some of these mounds, there might be one person. Some there might be a few people. And in quite a few of them, there are dozens of our relatives have been interred into these burials. So what came up really quickly is that the number of individuals on the NAGPRA list doesn't match up with the number of individuals recorded as disturbed in the field notes. And I'm guessing, I haven't finished parsing the data yet, but I'm guessing the grave goods also aren't going to match up. I'm guessing they're also going to be dramatically off. And one of the questions then that I asked myself was, well, where the heck are all our relatives at? And one of the answers that I was given is that remains of a certain condition, like the remains had to be of a certain condition in order for the anthropology department in the 1900s to be interested in retaining them. And so some of those relatives, we don't know what happened, if they went back into the mound, how careful they were when they backfilled, or if they're just in a pile next to the mound somewhere. We don't know what happened to them. There isn't a record so far. Maybe in those field notes that hopefully are at the Historical Society, there might be some more clues. But that's where my research is at this time. Next slide, please. So one of the things that also happens over time is a lot of these mounds get reused. And we were working on some a couple of summers ago, and we were working with archaeologists, and they couldn't understand how there would be Ojibwe mount or Ojibwe grave houses on top of Dakota mounds, and they had a really hard time with it. And one of the things I tried explaining to them, and I think I might have been successful, was how much intermarriage we've had, especially on this western part of our territory. We have an entire clan that was assigned to take in people who had Dakota fathers, and it's the Wolf clan. And that's where people who predominantly who had Dakota fathers, because our clan system is patrilinear, it goes through your father. I mean, mom runs everything, but your clan comes through your father. It's like a concession that the women made a long time ago to us. So that Wolf clan, many of those people are Ojibwe and Dakota. And I used to talk to Dave Matrios when he was alive, and he was a big drum keeper at Mille Lacs. And he said, you know, a long time ago, before we started, this argument started, and we started fighting each other. We really got along well, and we lived like in between each other. Like we had, you know, our homes were truly intermingled, and our families were intermingled to the point where we fluently spoke each other's languages, and were able to perform in each other's ceremonies, and knew each other's songs. And that to me is part of what this is about. And I was trying to explain to those archaeologists, it's like, it's probably a family plot. I was like, that's what I would say about something like this. But it was really difficult for them to accept. It took a year for them to get back to me and say, hey, I thought about what you said. And, you know, it's after, you know, talking to this person and that person and these other Native people, it's starting to make sense to me. So they're really just starting to figure out how our relationships to each other even work, which is pretty amazing, because they're supposed to be the experts on all these things, but they're really quite in their infancy, I think, of understanding us, or attempting to. Next slide, please. So these four characters here are the lead actors at the U of M, and they were professors and heads of the anthropology department over time. And what you see here is their names: Jenks, Ekholm, Wilford, and Johnson. Jenks was involved in 45 digs, the period between 1932 and 38. Ekholm was really busy in 36. It's the only year he worked at the university, I think. but he went out 13 times. Wilford has 110 between 32 and 57, so he was long term. And Johnson had 43 under his belt in 55 to 69. And not all the earlier ones in the 30s that Jenks and Ekholm were a part of, and Pot and Wilford, would have been in part for research purposes. So that's just sort of being curious about what's going on and not wanting to ask anybody what's going on and grabbing a shovel and digging. This practice lessened over time, and by the time like Johnson and Wilford's later career was happening, a lot of it would be things like bones turned up by a plow by a farmer, erosion. A lot of people are buried along ancient lake boundaries, what they call prehistoric people, but we still know as us. And so they'll find them in gravel pits. Those old beaches are gravel pits now, or they use them as gravel pits. And also, like I stated, road construction. Next slide, please. And then these are just some tag along fellas who were with. You could see they weren't very active at all, but they're still there. They often assisted some of the major players. Cooper and Leland worked as a team. And they were all over Minnesota, these guys. And before all of these guys, there was a man named Lewis, and then another man named Jacob Browers, and they mapped as many of the mounds in Minnesota as they could find when they were active. And those guys would have been way back, like 1908 and times like that. And when they, at that time, they would be calling it antiquarian investigations, which is again just curiosity and probably looting at that time. Next slide, please. So a lot of these are along the riverbanks. So if you get to a place of water, like in the Anishinaabe way, when we talk about it, our burials were placed there because it's designed to mirror the birth process when you're in the womb. And that's how we understand mounds. And the way that we talk about it is you're placed back, into the mound, which is representative of the womb, and it's always near the water because we came from water. And so that's where our journey starts, is in returning to water. That's why we talk about placing the mounds near the water. And that's just Ojibwe people. I can't speak for the other people like the Dakota and the Arapaho who built mounds here, even though they're my relatives. I can't speak for them. It's not my place. Next slide, please. So this covers a little bit. This is the frequency. You can see what decades we're busier, I guess, than others. The 30s was 1930 to 1940 is the big year, and then 1960 to 1970. There are some records that I need to go through, and I need to find the field notes related to them because it's not listed who was there, which is like day one in your field notes. You list everybody who's on the dig or at the site. Like at William Warren, we're not digging, we're scanning, we're using ground penetrating radar and all this electromagnetic stuff, something we call the Devil's Game Boy. It's a good time. Is if you push the wrong button on it, it screws everything up and you have to start all over. It's a great time sink. It's supposed to save time. But you can see really by the 80s it had stopped. But one of the places we're specifically interested in at Mille Lacs was, and my boss and I were trying to figure out who it was, and we haven't been able to find them yet. But there's a oral history where this man used to come up, and he used to come to the big drum there, and he befriended a lot of people. And at some point in time, I don't know why he decided to do it, he came up in the middle of the night and they looted a bunch of graves out of a mound. and we don't know why he decided to do that. They remember he's from the University of Minnesota, and that later he died in a car crash. And so, they say "Mi buck," which is like, well, this is what happens. It must be how it goes when you do something like that. So we've been specifically looking for those grave goods because there are a lot of them. And we keep coming close, but we keep missing. But hopefully someday we'll be able to locate them and then return them to the earth, which I'll talk a little bit more about down the road here. Next slide, please. So these are the amount of burials that were actually disturbed. 139 of them we know were burials that this is just that the University of Minnesota was involved in. 48, we don't know, the data isn't there, or we haven't found it yet. 9 mounds appear to contain no burials, but there may have been burials there before. It's just by the time they got to them that the relatives have fully gone to earth. And then 2 they think maybe, but they're not 100% sure. And then another 2 just have no data whatsoever. So those are just some of the numbers we're dealing with here. And those aren't individual burials again. Those are also group burials, which can range from 2 to I think the largest one I saw was 36 people. Next slide, please. So this is about, again, related to what I spoke to before, a little bit out of order, but the work we do today. A lot of it is like behind the Amazon building, there's a whole bunch of mounds, and this attitude of can we just sneak it through, or can we go in between mounds, or can we do this and that? And these are our cemeteries. And they just want to, run utilities through them, fiber optics, all kinds of things. And I like this quote from Kenneth, where he says, "No sewer through the Afton effigy mound. Find a different route for your sewer project. Thank you." That was his email, I believe, to the Army Corps engineer. And it's really, really to the point, nice and succinct. I appreciate his style, so I put his quote in there. I don't know him, but I appreciate his style. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons these places are really important is they tie us to where we come from. These places that we were put, these places that we traveled to, these places where our relatives have been for a long time. I know, like, where I'm from, my dad says we never traveled to the East Coast. He's like, we've always been here. And there are mounds up there too, and that's up past Grand Mound and the mounds on the river there, on the Rainy River. And then on either end of that, when the mounds stop, it turns into rock paintings, some of which they've somehow managed to take away. There's one spot where they blasted off an entire huge chunk, like a wall's worth, of rock paintings, and they went to the museum in Winnipeg, and when we go and ask about them, they're like, I don't know, we don't know where they went. We must have lost them. I was like, how did you lose, like, 100 feet, 100-foot by 15-foot slab of rock? How did you misplace that? Oh, maybe it's under a carpet somewhere or in the shed. But these places are dearly important to us. And one of the things that also, as I understand it, is when we put them back, our relatives back into the earth, it's an act of restoring balance. It's an act of restoring harmony for our people. And it's also, in a way, an act of reclaiming those lands that once we were allowed to live on freely, without hindrance from the United States, without hindrance from Minnesota, without hindrance from anything. And we were allowed to exercise that harmony with one another. And putting our relatives back is also an exercise of that harmony. And to me, that's why doing burial recoveries and things like that. Or like we worked with a whole bunch of tribes, Arapaho. We worked with Lower Sioux quite a bit with Deuce's dad, and it was really a pleasure to be able to work with those old men and learn something about about why we're here and why we're doing this. And same with my boss, Terry Kemper. He's really helpful. And the other old man we work with, Jim Cummings, they really help us to understand what we're doing and make a kind of peace with all this and understand that it's an act of creating harmony, and that the act of harmony will ripple out into the world as people learn of it. Next slide, please. I think there's just one more. Oh no, two more. So what is next? This I actually know what I want to do. I want to finish collecting this data and comparing it to this table that I already have, and then build a database with a content management system on the front end that our TIPO departments, ours for sure, if anyone else wants in, let me know, because I'm working on the whole state and not just the university. Get in touch with us at Mille Lacs, because we want to help out all our people that are involved in this, and not just Mississauga, Iguaning. It's for everybody that we wanted to do this. And sorry, I had a message pop up and it distracted me there. I had purpose and then I got distracted. I want to finish putting this together and it be a place where we can put everything that we know as well. And the software that I want to use has granular controls over access, so we could keep certain things just for us, and maybe certain things for like the archaeologists maybe we contract with, or certain things for just our TIPO office, or that kind of thing. And it would include field notes from us all the way back to Brouwer's maps. It could include photos, it could include related oral histories. And so the people who come after us, who have our jobs, don't have to figure this out from nothing. Which I guess is actually kind of part of the fun, but they can have a leg up and they can be able to go forward easily, efficiently, and confidently, and continue to restore harmony for our relatives. Next one is the last one. So these are our cemeteries, and this again speaks to that harmony. It takes away when you go to these mounds, especially like we've rebuilt some and reinterred people, and there's such a profound sense of peace for me there, having been a part of that process, for knowing what happened, for being able to bring those relatives. They actually never moved far, but being able to take them out from under the highway and to put them back into the earth, where in a way that hopefully they would be more comfortable with, rather than under a road. A lot of times we just try and leave them in place, unless they're under the road or something like that and they get disturbed. We don't like to dig up, we like to put back. In our department anyways. I think it's probably the same for a lot of people. And really that's what we just want to do, is put things back. And so I don't know what kind of role the university wants to play in putting things back, or helping us restore harmony to the world, but we could probably use a hand. And maybe it's training more cultural resource management people. Maybe that's extending that tuition waiver to our relatives who were forcibly removed from the state. That would be, I'd love to see that. I mean, it doesn't affect me at all, but I would so much love to see that. Tahashi, he wouldn't qualify, and he's one of the Dakota language professors there, and it seems like a disharmonious act. I'm talking about harmony a lot, but to me that's what this is putting those things back to get our harmony back. Anyways, I'm gonna stop now before I ramble on too much. Miigwech, everybody for listening. Miigwech Bizendawi. Help.